Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the doc. I'm delighted to be joined by artist David Smith here, who is helping us to celebrate Bealtaine, the month that celebrates creativity of older people and creativity in the lives of older people. And it's a subject, I suppose, that the doc has been very interested in for a long period of time, because we do a lot of work that looks at bringing generations together through art, mostly through our exhibition program, but also then into our education program as well. And this is where David comes into the picture. But I just want to say a big thanks to Tara and to the team in Bealtaine. They do amazing work across the country, and they highlight so much of the foundations of art practice in Ireland, because everything does flow through the generations, and it is that idea of what we can pass on to each other and what we can learn from each other that either is something to push off or to react to. And all of that is kind of really what gives us the energy as people who work in the arts. So we're very grateful to them and to all the people who have tuned in to watch us today. And I suppose, David, I was really came across your work about three and a half years ago. I came across it as in an exhibition that you did in Sligo, and then your work in the Corgia Festival. And we've had the great opportunity of working with you for about two and a half years.
Right, yeah, about that. Yeah, I guess our relationship sort of started with education projects in the dock. I worked quite a bit with Laura Mahan, just producing workshops and even recently kind of Zoom workshops for reaching out to kind of young people and different people of different ages for creative projects basically. And then I suppose it's since kind of blossomed into showing more of my own sort of personal work, which tends to move between sort of painting and sort of sound and film, at least recently anyway.
Yeah, and I was really interested in kind of what brought you to art. It's very often there's something inspirational, or like somebody inspirational, or where you live that kind of gives you the permission to pursue a life of creativity and to invest in yourself as a creative practitioner.
Yeah, I suppose it started. I'm not sure I have a specific memory of that, but I think coming from my father being a musician. My sister also plays music as well. So kind of music and creativity has been in our house since I was young. And I'd spent a lot of time when I was a kid, sort of especially summers, spent on my grandfather's farm, which was kind of a very rural part of Mayo, Global Finon, right near kind of Nathan Mountain. And I think that sort of early exposure to the landscape sort of shapes how you paint, how you think about art. So I think from an early age, I kind of knew, there was never really any question that it wasn't going to be a creative field. It was always going to go in that direction. So I kind of grew up sort of playing music and also sort of painting and drawing and all that. And that eventually led towards art college in Galway, Sligo and Belfast, and then various travels to Asia and working over there. So it's always sort of been there really. And I have, my family it's sort of a natural thing for them that sort of we're doing things like that. So it was never not an option. It was always going to happen, I think.
Yeah. Well, you're very lucky. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because not everybody has that support from the family,
Yeah.
So I do think, and I suppose it, might be a bit of a cliche, but definitely where you're from and how you're raised, where you're brought up and what you see and what you're exposed to is very formative, and it forms the bedrock of the kind of things you make later in life,
Yeah. I suppose one of the things that I suppose one of the highlights for me of working with you, David, was the commission that we did. It was actually a commission that we put together. Initially, the thought process behind the commissioning series was to look at the idea of, or to just even point or question a little bit about the idea of the forestry plantations that were happening in Leitrim, and obviously they are happening in Roscommon, Sligo, Mayo, and sort of this side of the country where there's big kind of crops of the Sitka spruce plantations happening. And I suppose in a way that has, it has a benefit to landowners, but then it also is very contentious from a biodiversity point of view, and has impacted in people's lives in unusual ways in terms of like farm size and sort of just the general land usage. And with that kind of in mind, we didn't really particularly want to take a political position as such, but we were interested in just saying this is an issue that's within our neighborhood. So we were working with people, a group of artists, particularly led by Natalia Baylis. And we decided to do a festival called Whose Woods These Are. And at the time, we wanted to work with a couple of people that we knew had a really strong interest in the landscape, a sensitivity to place and an interest in place. And we commissioned you to work with us. And honestly, we were absolutely blown away by the piece that came back from you. And it was just an incredibly beautiful, poetic film with this fantastic music that you composed yourself and played. And I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit, because it just took such a wide scope of this area over quite an interesting period of time in terms of seasonality.
It was one of those sort of things that when we first sort of talked about it, I had sort of, I assumed to myself, because I would mostly work in painting, I assumed I was going to take a direction that would be sort of visual and sort of tactile and stuff. But having kind of also worked sort of intermittently with music and sound over the years, and sometimes with photography, the first thing I did with that when we had that first discussion was to just record some sort of pieces of music. Really just, I mean, nothing major at all, just kind of little melodies or moments or textures or feelings, whatever like that. And it kind of started like that, you know. It's sort of like, which I'm kind of interested in anyway, as a creative process, how something starts as just a tiny seed and then takes on a life that you can't predict. So after we had our sort of first discussion about that, I think it was one of those things that it just hit me at the right time. It just kind of enabled me to kind of use the musical things I've been doing and sort of focus it into it. So the painting literally got pushed to the side for a little while I was out sort of traipsing around kind of Mayo and Roscommon and Sligo and Leitrim for, yeah, basically I suppose a lot of the autumn and winter of last year. And I was kind of photographing areas, you know, like these areas where the trees take on a kind of a destructive aspect, where they're falling over and breaking. And I think it also kind of, it keyed into things that are kind of apparent in my own work anyway, my own sort of feelings about nature, and having lived in Asia for more than a decade, and what those kind of mega cities kind of do to the natural world, and how it's, you know, that kind of compromising of the natural world around you kind of affects the work you make. So my experience of living in Asia has very much shaped the kind of painter I've become, and also how I think about sort of nature and our relationship to it, for good, bad, and otherwise, in all its kind of forms. I'm not taking one as one particular thing, but there is also that kind of poetry and destruction as well. So I guess all those aspects were starting to kind of find their way into the film, which I initially thought would be maybe a 4 or 5 minute thing, but it just kept kind of growing and growing. And then I was having difficulties, like, how do I structure this? And then I was thinking of a 3-act play. I need a kind of a structure that will sort of like be this kind of statement, a different kind of statement, and some kind of resolution. So I started thinking kind of filmically about how I could kind of make that kind of work.
Yeah. It was absolutely stunning, and it was almost like a short story, or novelistic in some way. And hopefully we will be able to send a link with this video, and people can have a look at the full length of it. But when we were talking, you were kind of saying that in a way this film work opened up, there was a few key points in it that are kind of seminal points for you, that you think you're actually now going to push off and use the imagery to develop a new project. And I was wondering, would it be possible just to maybe give us an indication of what those images are, what they meant to you?
Yeah, there's I suppose for this next project that we're calling Reflective Space, I wanted to kind of pull on a different thread that's been in my practice kind of for years, that is more to do with kind of Zen and breathing, and also just kind of concentration and just observing processes around us, whether it's noticing qualities of materials, watching a natural process kind of take place. So there's 2 or 3 kind of key points in that film. One of them maybe occurs maybe in the first third, the first act of it, and it's really just a shot of those Sitka spruce trees that we were talking about. and they're all quite still. And I was kind of interested anyway. I didn't want, in the film, I didn't want any panning shots or zoom. I didn't want that motion. I wanted to be like painting. I wanted to be kind of a still thing that you observe. So in this one particular shot, there's one Sitka spruce in the middle that just gently sways like this. And it becomes figurative. It becomes this kind of strange life, and everything around it is kind of staying very still. So there was that. There's also another one right at the end. The very, very last shot in the film was shot around, I think it was Loch Fee in Mayo. And it's really just two trees, and one of them is essentially dead and one of them is kind of living. And I thought, it was kind of, am I going to end on this kind of shot? Is it a little bit cliche? But it kind of encapsulated sort of things. And I'm always looking for a quality of things to feel like they're living and dying at the same time. And I think that kind of thinking kind of infuses, or seems to infuse, everything I do, whether it's kind of painting or installations or music. I'm looking for that kind of quality, a kind of, not just a live quality, but a decaying quality as well. So yeah, there's at least two shots. There's another one that I can't think of off the top of my head, but I'm sure we can intersperse it. Yeah.
But it's from that starting point that you're thinking of this new project, and there's a couple of interesting aspects in that, and potentially it's something that is it has the potential to be quite intergenerational. So you're looking maybe at the idea of writing and reflective practice, but also reflective practices in terms of mindfulness. And yes. I think that's quite an unusual project structure. And I know you're just at the beginning of it, but can you tell me what you're thinking, how it'll work, what form it takes?
Well, I guess one of the first sort of plans that I have, even though it is still sort of forming itself, but I kind of decided early that I wanted to work with someone who focuses in writing. Because it's an area that I know very little about, but yet there's a poetry that I want to kind of access there as well. And I also I'm planning to be working with a mindfulness practitioner who can maybe start off workshop groups of different ages to get them thinking about kind of stillness and breath before we start moving into actually making things. Because I'm trying to access, which is all I always find difficult to articulate it. I'm trying to access the kind of the thing that happens before a creative decision, the kind of the breath or the stillness or the kind of mental space that where kind of possibilities kind of open up before you make these kind of decisions. And I think it sort of comes back to sort of books I've read years ago when I was in college. I read a lot of books on Zen and kind of practiced it intermittently as well. But there was one by a guy called Shunryu Suzuki called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And the basic premise of it really is that in the expert's mind, your cup is full, shall we say, and in the beginner's mind, everything is kind of possible. So I suppose those kind of thoughts are sort of underpinning what I'm thinking of doing. The idea is that I'm trying to work with maybe a couple of different groups of different ages, getting them to think and make work in this kind of form that will then sort of feed into a later, possibly a film, but with potential to do other things as well. It may be photographic prints, it may be a lot of things. As I've discovered before, my original idea will be one thing and then it takes on a life that you don't expect. So I'm expecting that.
Well, that's always the joy when you bring people into the mix, because I suppose that's what gives it the energy, and it can ping off in any direction depending on what interests people as well. I wanted to because I suppose today we both have been, over the last 2 days, been working here in the dock. We're in the middle of an installation for our summer show, which is called Second Summer, which obviously makes a nod towards the second summer of lockdown. And we've been looking at the first gallery, Gallery 1 in the dock, which is at the top of the stairs, at your work in context and your painting work. And there's kind of a couple of exciting things sort of happening, and I'm wondering how you're feeling just pre this show opening and what you're paying attention to.
Yeah, no, I'm
excuse me.
Units of our initial conversations around that, about color sort of happenings on walls and how the paintings kind of relate to space as well. Because I've always thought a lot about scale of work. When I was in Asia, there was, or at least I always found that there was a lot of kind of very large scale work for the sake of scale in certain kind of galleries, in galleries that couldn't quite fit them. So I always And it's also a way that people kind of live there. I mean, my first apartment in Asia was the size of a bathroom. So that mentally affects you over time. So when I come here now with the dock, we have these very, very high ceilings, and things can breathe and ping off different kind of relationships. And the idea of these kind of arches and colored backgrounds and the scale of certain paintings, I think is it's quite a new way for me to think about work as well. Which is another way, I guess it's just another example where you don't know where this is going to go, but I'm kind of loving the initial sort of things that are happening, or relationships that are happening between kind of space, the object of the painting, and the scales, and how you position them, and how you think about light around it, and all those things.
Yeah, and I suppose as you're talking, I'm just thinking, like, in a way, you and your paintings have been in lockdown. You know, it's not just, you know, it's your self-expression as an artist and that output, and now they get this chance to breathe in the world and connect with, because it's a group show, like a whole range of different artists' work. And I'm wondering, you know, in a way, kind of retreating, like that sudden thing that we all had to do, which was like not see other people. That was kind of difficult, but in a way quite dramatic. How are you feeling now with this idea of kind of coming back out into the world?
Can't come soon enough, to be honest. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, finally, you know, to see physical things in real life and actually move around a space. Because I guess we've all gotten used to Zoom, and we've all gotten used to virtual gallery spaces, but it is a sort of it's a limited sort of thing in its own way. Useful, that it's got us through, you know, a lot of the pandemic, but also, you know, people I think do miss interacting in the physical world, and you can see it in everyone. When you talk to people, artists a lot as well are just dying to experience, whether it's music, whether it's sound, whether it's echoes in a space, whatever it happens to be, we're dying for that sort of experience, I think. So I can't, you know, when this show opens up, I'm like, I just can't wait to just walk around it, you know.
Yeah, I can't wait either, David. And I think the show is actually, I'm very excited about it, because there's kind of so many little touches to it, and lines in terms of color, and lines in terms of artistic practice. And even when we were talking the other day about, let's say, the presence of color within your work, like a lot of people might look initially at your work and say, oh, it's, you know, that it's actually monotone, but actually it's very complexly colored. And then we have another artist like Brian Fay, whose work is kind of pretty much based from drawing, but referencing all the time, mapping and referencing back to art history, which actually is in line into your work, because we were talking about that idea of these the 7 principles of painting, that, you know, which is a very old kind of maybe Chinese kind of rubric, which underpins a kind of a particular aesthetics. So there's so many things happening in those lines that are drawn between you, and I think that's really exciting. And just the idea of art being in dialogue in this beautiful building, and the potential of having kind of the privilege of showing people around, the privilege of introducing them to the work, and kind of hopefully that level of excitement that they'll have just being in close contact with art again. Like, I actually cannot wait.
No, honestly, it just cannot come soon enough.
Yeah.
For the sake of just having, I mean, even ourselves, that weren't just talking on Zoom, we could talk in kind of in real life, and actually kind of, you know, figure out where things might go. And I'm actually really looking forward to meeting the other artists too as well, because I know they're all going to be feeling the same thing, you know. So just, you know, let's end this lockdown as soon as possible. And I think people want to see art in real life, you know. I certainly do.
So just, I suppose, maybe just to wrap up a little bit, I'm just wondering about this, the timeline of this reflective space project. When you're hoping to get kind of started with it, and can people, if anyone is watching, where can they find out more about it?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking that it'll be something that'll happen over the summer. So I think around, probably, I'd say sometime in June, we'll be kind of starting it sort of properly. There's a few things to kind of be organised, logistics of it wise, but I will be putting out sort of probably an open call for people to contact, you know, through the doc, to contact myself, so we can kind of get the kind of workshops moving and get it kind of up and running. There'll probably be a sort of, I'll try to create a sort of, I guess, a mission statement, or a kind of a brief that people can kind of start to think about first of all to kind of respond to, and then we can kind of move from there. So that there'll be different aspects to it. I'll be working in terms of making things and responding things, and then we'll have a writer working with text, and we'll also have someone working with breathing as well. So trying to kind of unite those kind of aspects together and then produce a work from what is made from it. So hopefully, it's, sometime in June we'll be starting it properly.
That's really exciting. Thank you. Thanks, David. And thanks again to all the people in Bealtaine, and I wish everyone who's participating in it the best of luck for the rest of May, and keep up their creativity throughout the whole year.
Cool. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks a million, David. See you soon.